Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 230, and what a week we just experienced, with Friday being one of the most epic fake outs that I've seen in this market in a long time. Pretty much all the bearish energy was absorbed in a single hourly candle after Federal Reserve Chair Powell's speech at Jackson Hole. And I'd assume there was some wild liquidation numbers for the leverage shorts that were piling up as the market looked precariously weak leading up to that moment. And now here we are. The August new moon has come and gone as of yesterday, and so far we're seeing the crypto market holding up with no flash correction yet, although you never know what could happen in the immediate short term with this crazy crypto market, especially on a Sunday. And perhaps by the time I release this, there's some scary news that comes out of the woodwork. You all know the market maker loves to play with retail investors' emotions over a weekend when crypto is trading alone. But anyways, it is what it is. And so far, we are seeing overall strength in the crypto market around this August new moon, which aligns with what I've reviewed with all of you last week in the Red Pill podcast when I recapped how 80% of the time we do have a notable correction that is around the August new moon and up to about 48 hours after, which, by the way, that would align with tomorrow being that full second day since the August new moon, so keep that in mind. We'll definitely be talking about that in a moment. And then besides the 80%, we have the other 20% of the time, although we might get a small correction in that 20% of the time. That small correction ultimately leads to higher prices, and then when all is said and done, we close off the month of August green. And the pattern that I discovered for the timing of those 20% of the time examples is every 4 years, since it happened first back in 2013, and then in 2017, and then again in 2021, all 4 years apart. And of course, here we are in 2025, 4 years since the last time that happened. And so far, that's what is playing out as we record today's Red Pill podcast, which is great to see, of course, because it definitely means we're onto something here at Waters Above. And there's clearly a method to my madness with all this moon talk. So I'm sure you could all imagine, since that wild swing that we had on Friday, that we have a lot to cover here in today's podcast. So let's get straight into it. But as always, before we get started, make sure to get relaxed, get comfortable. Grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or a glass of wine or beer if it's getting a little later out there in the Matrix, or any beverage of your choice, of course. And also make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill. But before you leave a comment, please just make sure to use the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered that project in at least 3 months. So if it's been over 3 months since I've reviewed that altcoin, or if I've never covered that altcoin before, as long as it has at least 1 year of chart history here on TradingView, you can go ahead and comment below with the name of the altcoin and include the ticker symbol next to it as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes, those top 4 projects will be selected for next week's Red Pill. And by the way, last week we covered about 30 different charts, 20 to 25 different altcoins that are in my personal portfolio. It was the What I'm Investing in special, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. But during that podcast, I skipped over reserve rights, ticker symbol RSR. Don't worry, today that will be the first altcoin that I cover after we get through everything that we normally do with our Red Pill podcast. So I will absolutely be covering RSR as well as 4 to 5 other altcoins here in today's Red Pill. So we have a lot to cover. Let's get into it. Now, we have tomorrow, Monday, August 25th, which is actually tied to Chinese New Year, which was the 29th of January. And you'll see how these numbers all come together, because January 29th naturally was the 29th day of this year. And these two dates, tomorrow and Chinese New Year, are 209 days apart. When you remove the 0 using the rules of numerology, you have that 29 code again. And these two dates are also within 29 weeks apart. And what makes all of this even worth bringing up is the fact that 29 days after tomorrow, the date that we're decoding, will be the Hebrew New Year, Rosh Hashanah, the start of Rosh Hashanah, the first day out of the 3. And if you don't include the end date, it will be on the 23rd, will be 29 days. And as many of you are aware, that is the actual day of Rosh Hashanah in the Gregorian calendar, September 23rd, which happens to be the day leaving 99 days left in the year. And what is this number 99 esoterically? You speak it out, it is 2 nines, meaning esoterically this becomes 29. This is a very powerful connection, something that I teach in my decoding mastermind. So tomorrow, August 25th, is literally connected to both Chinese New Year and the Hebrew New Year with this 29 code. And for those of you that are curious, this number 29, it reduces to the master number 11, as 2 plus 9 equals 11. And 11 is symbolic of new beginnings, restarts, and resets. So energetically, I'd expect tomorrow, August 25th, to be a very interesting day for the markets, especially once the traditional markets open up after 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, let's keep this in mind for tomorrow, especially since it'll be that 48 hours after the August new moon, which is something that I've taught you all about in Red Pill podcasts leading up to now. And for those that don't remember, it's typically 48 hours following the August new moon that we see the worst of it during the corrective phase, especially regarding Bitcoin. But obviously, Bitcoin will put pressure on the alts, etc. But remember, one of the things that we have going on right now is Bitcoin dominance is very weak. So whilst we've had this pump up on Friday that kind of trapped all the bears from what was going on earlier in the week, it's not the same story here in the Bitcoin chart as it is in the Ethereum chart, for example. Let me quickly pull up ETH and show you what I'm talking about, because you can see that ETH actually broke structure and it pushed up into a new all-time high with a 14% green candle on the daily. And as of this weekend, we're looking very good, just kind of holding on the prior resistance from August 13th, a little earlier in the month. That means that Bitcoin dominance is weak, and we know this because we can see Bitcoin dominance has been sustaining daily closes below 60% now for some time. All of the things we want to see, and this is exactly why in the earlier updates from the past week and the week before that, pretty much all of August and all of my text updates, I was telling everyone to just relax when it comes to these swings on the alts, because when you're seeing this combo of Bitcoin dominance getting weak whilst Bitcoin price is already still in price discovery, and then you also have Ethereum pushing up to new all-time highs, this is not the environment to start getting shaken out, all right? So I think what we saw back on Friday was something that it just was the perfect formula for the doubt and the disbelief to get rugged. And here we are. So we're going to be covering all of these different ingredients in the recipe during today's Red Pill, but I just want to kind of remind you that this is the stuff that we've been talking about for some time now, and we're watching it happen in real time, which makes it feel like it's too good to be true, or, you know, maybe weird for some people, but it's not actually much different from what was happening in the end of 2020, moving into the price discovery phase for Ethereum back in that cycle. So it's exciting times. It's very exciting, and I know it doesn't seem so in the charts across the board, but this is typically how an alt season plays out, where we see a drain of Bitcoin dominance, we see Ethereum and the big cap altcoins push into price discovery, which we're already seeing with Binance token, and then we see that flood into the lower cap altcoins, which that's where the real gains are. So that sets the tone for today's podcast. Now let's get back into what we were talking about with tomorrow. And one big thing to keep in mind about this moment tomorrow with the end of that 48 hours of the new moon that we were just mentioning, and specifically the August new moon, which is a very powerful one. Well, it also happens to be the end of this Mercury shadow phase. And we've actually talked about this a little bit earlier in last month, probably like a month ago from today. Actually, even earlier than that, because I usually prep you guys with the Mercury retrograde analysis at least a week or two before we actually have Mercury station retrograde. And I taught you all about this pattern here. How the typical pattern is we move up into Mercury retrograde, which we did, and then we have a correction into the start of Mercury retrograde, which we did, and how when you mark off the price of where we start on Mercury retrograde to the end of Mercury retrograde, it's sideways, which is what happened, and then we have a shadow phase. And this shadow phase is typically 2 weeks, and you can see a lot of manipulation during this time. And what we've seen actually in this shadow phase was an initial push up into price discovery, followed by this arduous sell-off. And what's great to see in this is the fact that Bitcoin dominance has been dropping at the same time as the Bitcoin price. This is what we want. What we don't want is Bitcoin price going up and Bitcoin dominance also going up. And if we see Bitcoin price going down and Bitcoin dominance going up, that's even worse. So this combo of Bitcoin holding these levels, we're seeing a rotation right now. And that's what every altcoin holder, of course, welcomes, especially as we're in the late stages of this cycle. And it's nice to see evidence for all of the theoretical stuff. Now it's not really something anybody can doubt. But again, let's not speak too soon. Let's stay neutral. Let's stay level-headed and continue that essence for the rest of today's podcast, because we're not moon boys here. We're not trying to get overly exuberant and overly bullish just for no reason. We're not following the herd. We're looking at these esoteric elements and applying them accordingly so that we could be prepared far in advance before any of it occurs. And I already told everyone, I would anticipate August to be a very bullish time frame for Bitcoin in general regarding price, and that is still technically when we have Bitcoin's all-time high. We also have a new all-time high for ETH as of a couple days ago. When? In the month of August. So this is aligning, and I will have some thoughts to share with you all a little bit later regarding XRP, because I know there's a lot of XRP holders here. It's my biggest altcoin holding, so I of course am a part of this alongside with you. I am enjoying the journey together with you. I would of course want to see XRP do crazy things to the upside, just as you want. So trust me, it's definitely something important, but as a technical analyst, I need to work with the data in the charts. So we have Bitcoin now leaving this Mercury shadow phase, and I want to quickly show you what happened after the past couple shadow phases have come to a conclusion on this exact chart. So we have over here, I know it looks a little messy. It'll look cleaner as we go back in iterations more in the past. It's just I've been putting a lot of emphasis on the current iteration we've had because I'm tracking our current cycle, of course. So that's why you're seeing all these fractals overlaid and all this madness going on. Well, it's because it's telling me the future. And that's what we're focused on here. We want to know what's to come next. So this one might look a little messy, but the ones that go backwards won't. All right, just a quick warning for those of you that are visual learners, which I definitely am. So we have the shadow phase in gray. And once it comes to a conclusion, you see there's a release of energy. Bitcoin price moves up. And this is about, I want to say, a month. 31 days. And then we consolidate. Let me go to the daily chart. This will be a little better. So you can see right here, we just went up for about a month and then have a little bit of a consolidation and then another pulse to the upside. But we want to focus on what happens immediately after this shadow phase, and if there is a pattern. If there is a pattern, then of course we're going to pay attention to it. So then we have this one over here for the end of last year, December, and it was also, let me pull up the moons, it was also in alignment with the, sorry, one second. Let me actually, I don't want to confuse people. Let me not cover this right now because it's going to add too much to the stew. Nobody's going to be able to taste what matters. So we have Mercury retrograde in Q4 and very bullish moving up even bullish into the first couple of days of the shadow phase, which is something we recently just saw, followed by the pullback into the end of the shadow phase. So we're seeing a lot of similarities, man, where we have the high technically in the shadow, the high in the shadow, a correction, and then even this like pump back up and then pump and dump, kind of what it feels like we're doing right now. And then the pivot was on that moment about 24 hours after the shadow phase was concluded. So we moved up generally, and it lasted about 21 days. Let's call it 3 weeks. We did have in the midst of it a little bit of a pump and dump vibe, but this is actually quite typical for January. January, we love to have these weird shakeout fakeouts. We also saw that in 2024 and in 2021 as well. You can see this move up to January 7th, 2025. Let me show you about 2021 so you know I'm not just making this up. So we have the move up perfectly into January 8th, followed by a notable pullback. We have also the year right here, January 2024, we had this pump and dump into the very beginning of January. It's about January 9/10, and then a correction. It's very normal. Anyways, could be interesting if that's how they play it in this upcoming year as well. I don't know if they will. It's a little late in the cycle for Bitcoin for me to imagine Bitcoin making it all the way up to January 2026, but we'll track this as we go. Anyways, we have after the shadow phase bullish release to the upside, looking good. It had everything to do with like Trump's inauguration chaos. A lot of memery going on over here. Even Trump himself released a meme coin. You guys remember that? Then we have this iteration here back in September, which I do want to focus on, September 2024, because it's sort of in alignment with the seasonality of what we're heading into next. And you can see that also after the shadow phase, we moved up bullish, and not just bullish, like, I mean, 100 days pretty much moving up. Kind of this like wiggle to the upside, but then a notable release at the beginning of November all the way until mid-December. And that could very much be what's in the cards for our cycle as well. And I'll share more information as to why I think that's the case for us here in 2025. But we can see that we went up for about 100 days, pretty much all the way until the next Mercury retrograde, which for us would be in November of this year. And remember what I've been telling you all about with the final Mercury retrograde of the year, or the one that happens in Q4. It's essentially exclusively bullish. So keep that in mind. Whenever we have a Q4 Mercury retrograde, especially in our bull run years. And we know we're in a bull run year. Look at Bitcoin's price today versus January of 2024 versus January 2023 versus January 2022. It's just been up, 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 and up year by year by year. So we're still in a bull run until the trend breaks. As they say, the trend is your friend. It'd be funny to just map out every yearly close and how things have been going, how they've been tracking since, since 2021, moving into 2022. So I'm actually personally expecting something like this for our current cycle, and little choppy corrections along the way. And every time we have one of these notable corrections in Bitcoin, which might not be too much, 10%. We've just experienced a 10% correction recently, by the way. Here you have almost 10%. Every time we get one of those, Bitcoin dominance just gets weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. That's what we want. As I told you, if we're seeing a correction in Bitcoin's price, and we're also seeing the Bitcoin dominance rolling over, and we're seeing what it does in the general altcoin market, that's kind of the vibe of the end. The end feels like that. And that's what happened back in 2021, 2017, and for the few altcoins that existed at the end of 2013 into 2014. So I'm personally expecting this to be the case for us, especially since we're getting ETH pushing up into the prior cycle peak. Let me just pull back so you can see what I mean. So this is where ETH is trading at, and that is where ETH was at the peak of 2021. This is a very good sign to see Ethereum trading all the way at $4,768 as we record today's podcast. And if you take a look at how many days it took Ethereum to close a new all-time high from here on a 3-day candle, by the way. This is a little bit more of a sophisticated way to look at it, but I believe it'll be helpful because right here on the candle of, it was around January 22nd, we had this final kind of consolidation going on, back testing prior all-time high. A little bit of a washout, which I feel is in alignment with what we just saw recently too. Let me show you. So we have here, we got our high, we had a little bit of a washout, and then just a full-blown recovery, push back into the high. It looks identical. It looks identical to this. So if you measure off of January 22nd and go to the May 10th top, it's about 108 trading days. And if we were to line that up with where we're at today and consider it being this August 22nd 3-day candle close, and we were to push up, 108 days would technically bring us to around December 6th. Now, whether it's December 6th or whether it's a little bit later in December, it doesn't matter. But the point is that it gives you an idea of the move, right? Where we were last time, how we behaved around this time. And also this whole washout here is very similar to the one that we got leading into the C19 crash. And we've seen the stock market doing a very similar thing. So we have the C19 crash, V-shaped recovery, stalling out a little bit over here, a backup, same here, backup, release, slice through all of this golden pocket, push straight to the 888, push straight to the 888. We got a little bit of chop there, and then now we're in this section, same deal. Bitcoin dominance doing the same thing, by the way, as well. Now, one thing to remember, in this move here from January 2021 to around April 2021, Bitcoin wasn't going up much more. It was like 60 to 63 to 62. Like it couldn't really push much higher than 65K, if I remember correctly. But all the while we were seeing what ETH was doing, going up an additional 250%. So that was all during the alt season moment, which is pretty much what we're pushing up against as we speak. So this gives you a little bit of the timing as well, and why I have this thought that the Q4 Mercury retrograde, that November into early December timeframe, aligns with pretty much everything we're also seeing with the Ethereum chart and compared to the Bitcoin chart and compared to the Bitcoin dominance. Now, we could add in additional layers such as like USDT dominance, but I don't even want to confuse you. Like, I don't even want to add all those additional layers right now. I just want to stick to basics one step at a time, and then once you all learn kind of the ingredients that are going on here, it's much easier to cook, right? So this is absolutely an important development that we're getting right now, and I will also be going over the stock market a little bit later because there's something there worth talking about as well. Let me just check on my levels. All right, we're good. So pro tip, look at this 3-day candle closure on the Ethereum chart. And if we get another 3-day candle above the current 3-day candle high, that to me is smelling like alt season is right around the corner. One other thing to mention is that out of that 108 days that I talked to you guys about, when comparing back in the last cycle, that move right there, it's about the last 60 to 70 days that things are going absolutely crazy when considering how the 2017 cycle went and the 2021 cycle ended during those alt seasons. So naturally, this would mean in plain English, from the second half of October until the second half of December, that time frame is likely to be where most, quote unquote, most of the gains are for the altcoins. Obviously, if you bought in earlier, better, but I'm just saying that that's where like a lot of the notable gains will be made. That's when everybody will be talking about crypto, when we see the others altcoin market cap chart start to break out into price discovery. Now, regular people don't even know what I just said, but they will naturally be gravitating to the crypto market once others altcoin market cap breaks into price discovery because it'll be noticeable in the prices. It'll be all the memery, like this Bonk coin, for instance. Nothing against Bonk, nothing against Doge, nothing against Sheeb, nothing against Pepe. I don't care about that shit. I'm just letting you know that's when you're going to start to see a lot of people that never talked about crypto start to talk about crypto. We're not there necessarily just yet there when it happens with ETH. or even XRP, XRP is a very big community. The people that are tied into that, I'm even part of that equation for sure, but it's not the same. All right, because XRP, in my opinion, are much more well suited, aware people when it comes to knowing about the economy, when it comes to knowing about the scam of the Federal Reserve System, when it comes to knowing about how things like quantitative easing work or fractional reserve banking, or you know what I mean? People that are more into XRP like typically have studied the economy a bit. Whilst people that are into like Doge, for example, I don't think they give a shit about learning about the economy. They just follow like what Elon is saying on his Twitter account. You know what I mean? No shade being thrown at Elon, no shade being thrown at Doge. I have a lot of Dogecoin actually. A reason I have it is for a technical reason. I might have covered it last week in the red pill. So I'm trying to stay very neutral into all of this. I'm just letting you know that big expansion phase that we got in XRP back in November, that's not enough to draw in the crowd. The current expansion phase that we're seeing in ETH, it's not enough to draw in the crowd. You really need to start seeing this others altcoin market cap chart breaking out into price discovery, and that's when you'll notice the euphoria phase. And I believe that will become noticeable between the second half of October to the second half of December. And that would mean that we would effectively be experiencing a repeat of how last year went. And I know it sounds boring, but we're in the home stretch, man. And what we're seeing on the ETH chart and the Bitcoin dominance chart right now is telling the story. And as long as we're heading in the right direction, that's all that matters. So what I'm seeing in this market right now is that XRP, XLM, and HBAR and the coins that are associated with that ecosystem, right? If you want to consider Algorand, if you want to consider IOTA, if you want to consider even XDC, right? That's fair. But the coins that I just listed, they had a really exciting run up back in November. Let me show you XRP. They had their really exciting run up back in November of last year. And I want to now go quickly into something with you guys because I've been getting questions lately about my take on Ethereum and why I've been talking the way I've been talking about Ethereum. And I'm going to clear up all the confusion for you and to let you know my philosophy on where we're at in the cycle. So as I mentioned moments ago, this was the big, exciting, euphoric move for XRP. I don't think XRP's run is over. I'm expecting XRP to go much higher from here. Okay? But I'm just letting you know that was an exciting moment. While that was going on for XRP, that was not going on for ETH, at least not structurally in the chart. Okay? So we had our exciting moment already for these projects. I mean, you can call them the ISO 222 projects, even though there's really no such thing. The only time you hear me saying that term is for semantic purposes. So you guys just know what the hell I'm talking about. But there's really not an actual ISO 222 token. It's just, we're talking about the ecosystem here, and most people associate that with these coins that we're discussing right now, which are some of the biggest portion of my portfolio, by the way, for many other reasons besides just this ISO 222 conversation. So what I want to get into is we've already had our exciting moment here for XRP. Now we're having our exciting moment for, and no, Solana, it was even earlier. Then it was XRP and the coins associated with that. Also, you had your memery going on too. Also, now we have ETH, right? So everything is playing catch up. Be clear of what that means in the grand conversation and why I act accordingly. I don't want to get involved in some shit after it's exciting. I want to be invested in something when it's boring. All right? So clears up one thing, but regarding XRP, XLM, and these other projects, I started building my XLM position actually below 9 cents. You guys over in our Discord, you can go to the one I'm investing in text channel and you could see for yourself. You have to scroll back to a while ago, but I was investing in XLM during the bear market. That's when you should be investing, right? So I got my position under 9 cents, pretty much right where the breakout level was, and then we're currently up 350% or something. Yeah, there you go. 350% from the breakout. My XRP play I believe probably 600% as of right now, because I know there was accumulation that was going around all around the 40 cent level. Right here, just pulling it randomly from the middle. Again, I've accumulated a lot of XRP over the years before the breakout. You guys haven't seen me investing in XRP since the breakout, and there's a reason for that, and it's what I just said to you before. I'm not going to buy something that's already currently exciting because there's no ROI there anymore. This is why I've told people all throughout this moment for XRP that I see the opportunity is in XLM, because XLM still has a lot more ROI, in my opinion, compared to XRP. This is all documented, stuff I've even said in YouTube videos. So there's a reason why I'm feeling this way about these things. It doesn't mean I'm bearish on XRP. Okay, consider the context of the statement. So XLM plays up 350%. XRP easily for this cycle up 600%, 500% minimum on late entries. And now here we are talking about Ethereum, all right, which is now just retesting prior all-time highs. Let me turn off everything and zoom out and show you guys something. Because what we're getting right now is that Ethereum is now the talk of the town, like XRP was the talk of the town back in November of last year. So now Ethereum's getting all the attention. And just so everyone here is aware, when considering percentages in ROI, the reason I have not been invested or interested in Ethereum, I'll just pull this up while I explain this. Okay, 1. My long-term Ethereum position was accumulated around $300 to $400 back in 2020. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2, my play for this cycle was all accumulated around 1,500 to 1,600 Ethereum down here. You can go look it up in the What I'm Investing In text channel over in our Discord. Also, those buys go back 2 years ago, so there's a reason for that. Now, these lows that we recently got just pierced through the level that I already have built all of my play at on Ethereum. So there wasn't a point of me accumulating more. And reason number 3, coming back to what I mentioned about XLM and XRP and how between those two plays I'm up at least 450 to 550% when considering the breakdown of my portfolio. And if you were to have bought the absolute bottom on Ethereum during the bear market in June 2022, when we crashed to $900, from there until today, you would be up 400%. So you have to buy the absolute bottom on this shit to get something that you could have gotten on XRP, XLM, and many, many other projects. And that's why I'm feeling and talking the way that I do about Ethereum. All right. You would have had to bought the absolute bottom of the bear market, and then you would still have less gains than if you would have just bought the Trump pump from November 5th on XRP. As you can see today, 500%. Again, you would have had to buy the absolute bottom on ETH to do this move. All right, so I hope this clears up any confusion as to why I'm not the most excited about ETH this year and this cycle. And it's because I saw what it did last cycle, and I also saw what every other altcoin did last cycle, and I knew there was a higher ROI opportunity in other projects. But of course, I still cover Ethereum in my analysis here every week because it's more like the compass of the altcoin market when tied with Bitcoin dominance, of course. Just like Bitcoin is the compass of the entire crypto market. And for example, the stock market, world reserve currency, USD, reverse repo market, global liquidity, bonds, and commodities are like the compass of this whole gambling casino that we have fun investing in, right? So if ETH was to make it to 10K this cycle, which I believe it will, just consider that XRP making it to $10, which I believe that will also happen, that would be double the ROI from here based on today's prices than it would be investing in Ethereum from today's prices. And remember, last cycle, once ETH broke out into price discovery, I feel like this is important to mention. just because apparently things that I've said recently have triggered people regarding ETH, which I find fascinating, as if I don't know what I'm talking about here. This is shit that I've been tracking for 230 weeks straight. Like, you don't think that I have, like, you think I'm just saying it for no reason because I like Vitalik Buterin wrote me hate mail or something. Like, I could care less. The point here is that if you look at where this broke out from into price discovery to where it was the absolute top, that was 240%. So just consider that this is kind of where retail starts to FOMO in, and it's at the worst time, and it's on an asset that doesn't even have too much more ROI left. Because if we are to repeat, or if we are to do even a portion of this move, which is usually not the case, it would still not be nearly as much ROI as you can get on so many other projects. So just keep that in mind, okay? So yeah, last cycle, once ETH broke out into price discovery, it went up just under 250% higher from its 2018 cycle peak. But as of right now, even Bitcoin is almost 500% higher than the 2018 cycle peak, while ETH is half of that still less than 250% higher. So it was better to buy the top on Bitcoin, like, based on ROI. Now, with Doge, on the other hand, which I talked about last week, let me show you how much higher it is than the cycle peak of 2018. It's right there. It's currently up 1,145% higher. So yeah. And from the current price of Doge to the current all-time high peak, we are looking at 200% to go just to retest prior all-time highs. And that would be what would be necessary for ETH to go up to $10,000, which would be breaking out into price discovery. We would already be accomplishing that on Doge on today's prices just for it to return to its prior all-time highs. And this is one of the few old school projects that has always broken out into price discovery. So I'm anticipating that this time around for Doge as well. And then we could go on and on about these examples where ETH is just not the ROI play if you're getting involved with alts. And we actually can't even call Ethereum a safe altcoin to hold because of the recent crash that we've had back in April. How could you consider this safe when this shit hit the bed with a almost 70% correction, whilst XRP at the same time only had a 50% correction? And after it had a 600% move, whilst we didn't even accomplish that in ETH. I mean, at best, from the cycle low to this top, it was 350%. Again, you would have had to buy the exact bottom to get 350 and then still have an almost 70% crash. So again, there's just not a single metric that convinces me to build my investment thesis around ETH. Bitcoin has outperformed it. It will continue to. And then every other altcoin is still probably a better gamble until we start talking about venture capital. And obviously you guys know my take on venture capital because we're looking at a market that has, what, 100,000 plus altcoins at this point. You know, let me just quickly go to CoinMarketCap and show you. I'm sure the numbers inaccurate. Yeah, this can't be real. It says 20 million altcoins. Right? So of course, please remember what I'm saying here. Maybe only 200 of these projects are worth even entertaining. Maybe 100 of them actually matter. Yeah, and still, I would say that ETH is less interesting to me. It's only just getting interesting today because it's pressing up to all-time highs, and that's how retail thinks. Don't think like retail. That's how you get fucked over like retail does at the end of a cycle. So yeah, guys, please, I hope that clears up everything regarding my investment thesis, stuff that I mentioned last week in the What I'm Investing in special, and anybody who's getting triggered about what I'm saying with ETH, I don't know what to tell you, man. Become a wolf, take the red pill, and keep it moving. So getting back to this, what we're looking at here is that we are now moving into a new chapter of this cycle, and it's triggered by this move that we're seeing here in ETH and in Bitcoin dominance. And now I just want to quickly finish off this Mercury retrograde analysis that I was sharing with you all, because this will probably be the last time we need to talk about it, at least because we're moving into we're moving out of the shadow phase, and we won't need to rediscuss this until mid-October, right? So let's get this out of the way. We have an iteration back in May 2024, right over here. And you can see also that once we got through the shadow phase, we moved up technically for about a calendar month before topping out. And this is a theme where we are, getting through the shadow phase and we're generally moving up. That's kind of just what I wanted to share with you here. Then we have this prior iteration in January 2024. We now have an anomaly. We have a correction immediately after the shadow period, but you'll see that it was short-lived and that we eventually ended up experiencing a bear trap. And then this followed by a 50-day rally to new all-time highs. Oh, and by the way, for those people that perhaps forgot what was going on back here in January 2024, well, it was the launch of the first official Bitcoin ETF. So that's your exoteric event for them to ritualize. Just like coming up next month, we have the exoteric event of the FOMC meeting, which they will probably ritualize because of the interest rate conversation. I will be honest with you guys, we're 40 minutes into this podcast. I am so fucking bored talking about interest rate cuts and Trump's tariffs. Mamma mia, can we just... It's like people ask me, why don't I make YouTube videos too frequently? What am I going to say? What am I going to say? I feel like there's 1,000 YouTubers, again, every day, just interest rate cuts, Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, M2 money supply. Fuck. It's so boring. Sorry, rant over, but it's so boring. It's so boring. It's so boring. It's so boring. All right, let's keep going. So we had this moment back here. I believe we'll also have another moment coming up that'll be like this, where we get a false move because of this interest rate diarrhea that everybody wants to fill up their Pampers with. But ultimately, you can see that this was a very bullish move in general because it was a 60-day overall move. But from that dip, it was about 50 days, straight line to the upside, 90% gains. Mamma mia. So this is pretty wild. Then we have this prior iteration over here in September 2023. Same story. We leave the shadow phase and we move up generally. And I mean, still, like, this was about 70 days of up. But if you take it all the way to the peak at the time, before this notable correction, it was an 85% move. Probably like 85, 86% in general. And we had a sustained uptrend from one Mercury retrograde shadow phase to the next Mercury retrograde shadow phase before a notable correction occurred. So just keep that in mind because that aligns with this upcoming November, December timeframe. Just quickly check on my levels. All right, we're good. So I really want you to keep this in mind because we now want to go back to 2017 in September because there could be something going on here. And just remember, up 106 days, 80, what was it? 84, 85%. Now we're going to go back to September 2017 just to skip over this and save our time. Here we are, September 2017. We have from the end of Mercury retrograde shadow phase up to the top. Absolutely crazy move. Also lasting, about 90 days. So still kind of in that time frame, finishing off with an all-time high in Q4 Mercury retrograde. We actually hit the all-time high in Mercury retrograde Q4 of 2017. Also in 2021, it was the same deal. I mean, it's effectively when we hit our all-time high, right there after the shadow phase. It's super weird how we make it to the shadow phase and we get this top, like right in the first couple days, because that's just what happened recently. You see, like the same pump dump. Same shit over here too. Pretty wild when you start to see these patterns. You start to see the real reason they're happening. And then the powers that be, the market maker, the apex predator, the Federal Reserve, the governments, whoever you want to call them, they ritualize the dates with nonsense to give the public so that they think that's the reason why. But the reason they do what they do is based on astrology. So That's why I'm really interested about what's to come in September of 2025 with the upcoming Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year. I'll get into that in a moment. So let's get back on track. I definitely think 2017 has something worth continuing to focus on because of the similarities. And we have not so far here in 2025, for Bitcoin at least, been repeating the structure that we've seen in 2021, where Bitcoin had this, kind of double top vibe, or it rallied into price discovery, had one major correction, and then it just chopped like this before falling off. For us lately, when I zoom out and I turn off all the noise, you can just see we've been rallying and rallying and rallying with 25 to 30% corrections along the way, moving up higher and higher and higher, which is much more how this cycle looked. Much more how this cycle looked. And what we've just experienced here in into April is like one of these more devastating, corrections. And I think what we're about to have potentially in September is like one of these, which is perfectly in alignment with what happened in 2017 September. So just keep this in mind. If you remember in the last red pill I mentioned, I'd expect something similar for September 2017 to play out. And let me just pull up the moon as well. Specifically, when we were talking about the August new moon, until the final Mercury retrograde phase of the year in Q4, which in this example was the beginning of December 2017 until the first week of January 2018. A lot of you might remember Bitcoin topped here, but a lot of altcoins topped here on this kind of bull trap, which is usually in alignment with like a 702 fib. So here we made it pretty much all the way up to the top of the golden pocket, but it's right there in the heart of the golden pocket is where you had your alt season. And I wouldn't be shocked if something similar like this happened for Bitcoin, where perhaps we get that initial top again in like December. Maybe I would probably more lean to the November new moon. And then when Bitcoin has this false rally lower high, that's when we're seeing Bitcoin dominance really dump, and we get that final peak blow off top for the alts, which will make November and December feel like the most euphoric time frame, and that aligns with what I was just telling you guys a little bit earlier. So I feel like this whole move is gonna play out, and you can see that we have this momentary top into mid-August. Then we have a correction into the new moon. That's effectively what Bitcoin just did. That's what we're doing right now. And then we had this push up into September 2nd, which is the theme for that 2013 and 2021 example as well. When we push up into the first week of September, we covered that in last week's red pill. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. And then we get a correction in the month of September, right? But then it's bought back up and we recover within the month of September. This happened in 2021 as well, where we got a notable correction starting on September 8th, but then by the end of September, we were bought back up and we were pushing bullish into the month of October. Now, what's interesting about all of this is I believe the entire move will be tied, this upcoming entire move will be tied to the exoteric narrative going on with the Fed regarding rate cuts at the next FOMC on September 17th, which is precariously placed perfectly in between Bitcoin's, in between eclipse season. Shouldn't say Bitcoin's eclipse season, but the eclipse season. So as many of you are aware, this past Friday at Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Fed Chair Jerome Powell spellcasted the world regarding the September rate cuts, and the market got horny, and now we see what it did to the major indices. And don't worry, I'll cover that in a moment because it's definitely important for me to recap the stock market analysis here in today's red pill. But getting back to my theory, because I'm going to take everything I just covered with you up until this very moment and summarize it for you all right here, right now. So getting back to my theory, I'm thinking we can actually have a shaky start to this upcoming week with the August 25th decode that I was telling you about, since it'll be the follow-up after this past Friday's euphoric move on the traditional market's weekly close, and then perhaps a couple of days of chop, Monday, Tuesday into Wednesday. to see how all of that sinks in for the traditional markets. And then we move up into the monthly close. Bitcoin might even potentially make a new all-time high during that first week of September before the September total lunar eclipse on September 7th. And this is where I need you to listen very closely because I've been saying the same thing every week. But then after that initial quick correction that we get off of some weird announcement that brings uncertainty to the markets, during that, Bitcoin dominance is potentially dropping even lower, and also the gold chart is starting to correct even more noticeably. And this liquidity slowly starts dripping into the area of the risk curve that all of us are at here in crypto land. And then we actually push up even higher into the next FOMC, which ends up being a sell the news ritual. But, and this is a big but, if I feel like they might time this whole concept of a sell the news ritual with the next new moon, which is a partial lunar eclipse on September 21st. And it's also Rosh Hashanah. So I'm telling you, I think we will move up into this overall. We might even have a new high for Ethereum, breaking deeper into price discovery, like a notable high. So please listen carefully to what I'm imagining here, because this sell the news rate cut ritual might not hit the market until after the FOMC meeting, until after the September 17th meeting. And perhaps it would make the most sense for me for them to time it for Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year, and we get the more notable correction then. And this wipes out everyone who's FOMOing into the rate cut shenanigans. Just like all the leveraged short sellers got wiped out this past Friday a couple days ago. I hope you're all picking up what I'm putting down, because I feel like this is what's most likely gonna happen, how it's all gonna go down. So to summarize everything I said and perhaps even give you guys a visual, if I could get a clean chart, maybe I could draw it out a little bit too to help. Pull one up. Pull it up, Jamie. All right, so something like this. So we know around September 2nd is right there. Let me pull this off. Actually might make more sense to mark all the important dates. So we have September 7th right there, the lunar eclipse. We have September 17th right there, the FOMC. We have right here September 21st, the eclipse slash Rosh Hashanah right there to the 24th. And it goes something like this. This would be red. This would be red. This would be green. And this will also be green. I'm going to show you why. Could be this play. And now you see this structure right here? It's temporarily broken. Let's just say we close off the month of red because we opened it up all the way up here. So imagine we close at 119 on the monthly, and then we're down 7%. Now this would align with seasonality because that's the only month that we close red typically is September. And it could be a play like this, where Bitcoin barely makes a new all-time high. Like we're talking about like fucking 1.5% on September 3rd or 2nd or 4th. It doesn't matter. And then we get a quick correction that just brings us right back into the trading range. Then we pop up high into this, FOMC bullshit. The stock market maybe hits a little bit deeper, but then overall, once we get around here, there's a sharp pullback, and that's when the most notable pullback in the month occurs. Like a 20-something% correction. And then it's after all this chop that we see a recovery. into the next Mercury retrograde. And you have your cycle peak look like this, where it's a peak, the lower high bull trap at the golden pocket. This is how I'd imagine it playing. So it will start to look like the top of the 2021 market now, where we just can't really go too much higher. And that's been seemingly the case now all of 2025, where we're barely making new all-time highs for Bitcoin. You know, here it was an 11% higher move. If you go off of this move up to the next peak, it would be like another 11% or so. And then from here up to the next, it would just be like a small amount. And it would be very similar to how everything was starting to gas out back here in 2021 before we had the first real notable correction, which I suspect we're not ready for yet. Like, we're not ready for a bear market just yet. Bitcoin still has a lot of dominance to roll over, but Bitcoin still has a lot of positive energetics upcoming with the Q4 timeframe, regardless of the eclipse season. Because remember, in the last cycle, we made it up to a new all-time high technically by the second lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle. And I've been teaching you guys why not see us do something similar. Well, we did. We technically have been trading in price discovery leading up to the month of September, where we'll have that lunar eclipse. So that came to fruition. But the next thing is, why can't we have a new all-time high before the next cycle eclipse in 2026? There's no rules here. You're just learning as we go and figuring it out as we go. This is a very nascent asset class. It only has about 15 years of chart history. This is not like looking at the Google chart or looking at the Apple chart, or even better, looking at like the General Motors chart or something. You know, like, we have very, very limited data here. So the next eclipse will be a total it'll be a total solar eclipse, annular solar eclipse in February 2026, which actually aligns with Chinese New Year. It will be the official Chinese New Year date. So that'll be something that I'm really excited to make a podcast for, or I'll be making actually a full-blown decode for that, because it's the year of the horse. But anyways, we're summarizing this. I'm giving you visuals. We perhaps have a momentary top around Rosh Hashanah, and then we give back all the gains, and then it feels like we get our bigger correction later in the month into the start of October. And we have a little bit of pain at the first week or so of October, and then we pivot from there. That's kind of how I'm anticipating it, that we get some sort of market scare that happens tied to the FOMC meeting, which would be just the week prior, and then the event can happen on a weekend, like Sunday, September 21st, for example. Go over here. Sunday, September 21st. This wouldn't be weird because it would hit crypto really hard since it'll be trading alone. This is similar to what happened on Sunday, June 22nd, right over here, where Trump ordered the US military to strike the Iranian bases, and we saw what that did to the altcoins. So keep this in mind. This gives you an idea of how from now until late September, we can see this crypto market trading. And this would mean that a notable rotation of Bitcoin, and that would be a notable rotation time frame for Bitcoin into the more speculative altcoins. And I believe that would be at the end of the month of September is when that would be more noticeable, as we have Ethereum leading the altcoin market and officially breaking out into price discovery more likely very soon, you know, just with the way the energetics are looking for ETH as we trade into the first week of September before that total lunar eclipse. And please pay attention to me putting emphasis on the end of September because of what I just explained earlier, and also because of where we are aware of all the examples where September was a month where we actually experienced notable pullbacks in the past. So we have 2017 and 2021, both of our bull run top years, and they were big corrections in September. And now we're here in 2025, 4 years later, and of course we have the examples with September corrections in 2024, last year, 2023, 2022, 2020, 2019, 2018, and as mentioned moments ago, That also includes 2017 and 2021. So for the past 8 years, we've had notable corrections in the month of September. But as I explained earlier, there's also several examples where we see prices push higher to the upside within the month of September, and it ends up being a pump and dump. And this is why I'm anticipating an eclipse season correction, but likely after we've pushed up a little bit higher from here. And the exoteric bait will be the upcoming FOMC and rate cuts, which I wouldn't be shocked if it turned out to be a sell the news ritual the following week on Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year. So perhaps after Powell's speech on September 17th, we have from that moment until the traditional market's weekly close on whatever, September 19th. Let me quickly check in with that. Yeah, on September 19th. That's like a really euphoric time frame for the traditional markets. But then once we roll over to the new week on September 22nd, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and the partial lunar eclipse, or partial solar eclipse, excuse me, this partial solar eclipse here, which would be from 21st, 22nd, perhaps during that, we get some random bad news to dump the market for the following week to erase the gains of September. But then ultimately, that can all just be a bear trap to send us higher later into Q4. Again, we'll continue to refine our exit strategy accordingly as things progress. But so far, Bitcoin trading this deep into price discovery as we speak for as long as it has been, and Ethereum potentially moments away from breaking into price discovery. As Bitcoin dominance is getting weaker, this is the setup we've been waiting for, and I truly think we're in the home stretch. We've made it this far. Now let's finish off strong. So with that being said, now let's get into these charts and review the setup into the week ahead, as well as our upcoming weekly close later today. Starting with the Dow first, I want to actually look at the traditional markets, and then we'll get into the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP weekly close. So we're looking at the Dow, and we just had a major development. I'm going to turn off everything here and just look at the candles, and we've now just broken out into price discovery. After seeing a resistance going back to the end of last year, this is a very strong breakout, a candle that's almost 2% on the close. And we're now pushing higher. And remember, there's a very important number for us this year, which is 47. So I do anticipate the 47 code to be hit with the Dow Jones, 47,000 points this year. That would be a move of about 3% higher. That's not weird. Now, also, if we look at where things were back in the C19 crash, you'll see that by the time we broke above the February highs after the crash, it actually took us till November to get this expansion phase. And this is coming in earlier for us here in this iteration. And I believe the reason why is because our cycle won't continue into 2026. It should actually, I shouldn't say should, but it would actually make more sense if it were to push into 2026, that it would be the very, very beginning, like no later than March. And then we would have a deep correction into a bear market, something that's deeper than the tariff crash. That would make sense to me based on everything that I've studied and everything that I've been prepared for. Of course, I'm willing to adjust as we go, but the fact that we've recovered so quickly, we've now pushed even higher into this month of August, which is something that I've been telling you to anticipate, this doesn't shock me. And they had to give you an exoteric event for it to make sense, right? So we are getting this expansion. I do think Dow is heading into 47,000. And the next big update would be this, which perhaps other people are talking about. I don't talk too much about the Russell, but seeing this breakout candle and push higher than where we were at the beginning of the year past Trump's inauguration is a really good thing to see. It's a little bit exuberant. You know, we're looking at almost 4% candle on the daily. That's a lot for an indice, but that's the Russell, man. It will move like that. So we have now returned back to an area that has been kind of unfortunate for the Russell, you know, to be 100% honest, because you're going to see where my cursor is February 2021. Guys, it's August 2025. It's been over 4 years. So this now is pushing up against an area that has continued to get smacked down from. And I would love to see actual expansion on the Russell. That would be very positive, I believe, for speculative assets, which is obviously the crypto market. So we have a big major development there on that weekly close for the Russell, although I don't love seeing shit that happens on the final moments of a traditional market weekly close. It would have been much nicer to see this happen on like a Wednesday or a Thursday just to know it feels real. So I think tomorrow will give us a lot more clarity. So keep in mind, this is a very exciting development along with what's happening with the Dow, because it's finally catching up to something that the S&P has been doing, which is pushing deeper into price discovery, and also what the Nasdaq's been doing, pushing deeper into price discovery. So this is great to see the Dow finally make the move to catch up, and the Russell is on its way. I like to see this. So let's get over to Bitcoin real quick, very, very quick, just to look at where we're at with the weekly. We are now seeing Bitcoin loves this pattern of actually trading into this W double bottom kind of vibe, but a push lower in the past two iterations. Of course, we have this one, which was the last eclipse season in March, and then the lower low into April 7th. And then we have this move here happening on a tighter time frame of June 5th into June 22nd, also tied to an exoteric event. And then here the same type of move where we had also in the midst of this a very bullish pump and dump candle, just like we had over here. And then it led to us trading back into the bottom of the range. And then this immediately followed with a pretty big green candle that set a reversal. But what happens is after we set up the reversal, it's not just straight line, it's a little bit of chop. So you see here, after we pivoted, we have like chop for, let's call it a week over here after the big green candle. It took about 2 weeks. And I do think that's the case this time around as well. So if we were to look out about 2 weeks, that sends you into September 7th. It is very weird as we can be pushing up higher into the next FOMC purely just on that FOMO speculation of the rate cuts. And then again, like I said, I'm anticipating that to be a sell the news with a potential deeper correction coming in later. Although, you know, at this point, even if we were to get an immediate correction coming in now, it's not the end of the world because we still have so much support below us. And also we have Bitcoin dominance potentially going lower. So it could just be all rotation out of Bitcoin, and then the alts generally look pretty strong. So keep that in mind. The weekly close, though, holding the same level we've been closing at now for pretty much since last month. So nothing necessarily bad to see here, just no true expansion. And it's kind of feeling like Bitcoin's topped out in the short term, which most of you guys don't really care about anyways. I'd assume most of you are altcoin holders. And as long as Bitcoin holds these levels and continues to drop in Bitcoin dominance, it's going to look fine for the altcoins in general. One thing to keep in mind, though, about today is we have Bitcoin CME futures, which closed at 117,000 effectively. And we are currently trading with Bitcoin at 114,700. That means there's going to be a gap to the upside. So while Bitcoin would be opening here, we have closed here, gap to the upside. We've been closing all the gaps lately. There's been no real gaps left behind. There's a little one at 92. I think that might never close. We can't be so certain that that will close. Just consider it. We've been closing all of these local gaps though. So I'd really like to see how Monday opens up with the traditional markets. And if those are bullish, I think it's going to be obvious that Bitcoin and crypto is just going to continue to move up till the first week of September, which is something that we've talked about in last week's Red Pill. So CME is looking definitely interesting with the fact that we'll have that notable gap of about $2,000 to the upside. Bitcoin dominance is Bitcoin dominance. We've been talking about this a lot lately, so just let it drain. We'll get back to that maybe in a market update throughout the week. Now let's look at ETH just very quickly. I've already covered ETH quite a bit today in the podcast. So we're moving up back to the prior all-time high. We, on the weekly, are now just getting into overbought. The last time that we were approaching overbought territory was back in February of last year. And the true overbought territory for ETH, where it starts to really become noticeable that we're overheated, is when we're in the high 80s. So if I draw my cursor across, you're going to see that once we get above 85 and we push into 90, that's about where the cycle's up. So here we made it all the way up to, I think it was 95. Really notable correction, about 65% or so, which we've just recently experienced. Then we have one last push up, and that RSI got to 89. Let's call it 90. Here in our last cycle, we made it up to about 91, also on this blow off top vibe, and then we barely went higher. And as of right now, we're sitting at 74%. So I think we're good. I think we have a lot to go, and I do suspect that this will top in December. It would make sense according to the timing. Now let's look at XRP, because XRP is holding. XRP is now pretty much reset energetically. When we look at the weekly RSI, you're going to see that we've tapped below 50 a couple times and then we've gotten bought back up. Recently, everything got quite euphoric momentarily into July. But what we're seeing right now is that this is very strong to see XRP back above resistance and holding the prior resistance on daily or on weekly closes. So it's clear wick rejection, weekly close rejection, weekly close rejection, and since July we've been holding this as a support. So that's a very good development, and overall seeing our macro candle closures above $3 for XRP is a crazy development when looking back at the past, right? So when do we get our real expansion on XRP? Well, the thing here with XRP's expansion is that it's very rapid. It's always much quicker than something like Ethereum. And if we are to get the push out into Q4, then that's the timing. And we've seen some crazy moves on XRP in just under 4 weeks, about 26 days or so. So the thing is that whilst we're pivoting and whilst we're building up all this trading range around $3 and $2, I think we have to be very excited about the fact that the move could happen so quickly, because it'll just be like you wake up and things start going. But then also the reason I'm saying exciting is if we were to have that major swipe up, let's just say to $15, maybe we get pushed up a little bit higher depending on how euphoric things get. I've always kept 24 to 25 on the table for XRP, but I put most of my emphasis around 14 or 15. Let's just say we pushed up there. Well, guess what? When we have a bear market, coming back to this $2 to $3 territory might be the lowest it ever gets, because we've built so much strength here. It's not a blow off top like here. This is very nice to see how much time we've traded here. So again, with XRP, I believe we're in the home stretch. I think we just need to see this final move for ETH and then the flood of all that liquidity into the same basket of projects I was talking about a little bit earlier that already had its exciting move in December of 2024, November and December of 2024. So I have not changed my exit strategy on XRP. I'm anticipating still prices above $8. I think 8 on the lower side is like the de-risking targets for those people that have very, very big XRP positions. And in the event that we have this go in stages, which I'm feeling like it's not gonna anymore, but I feel like that's probably this move is what we're going to get next. I don't know if we're going to move this in stages where like it goes to 8 and then it comes down to 5 and then it goes up to 15. I don't think it's going to do it that way because of how long this is taking to build up. And also, I believe anybody who studies charts will agree with me. It's better that we're taking longer because we don't want these blow off tops anymore, especially in this asset that is known to be spending all of its life below $1. You don't want that anymore. You'd hope to never see $1 XRP ever again, unless you're somebody who, yeah, you just want a shitcoin forever. Because this thing should be much, much higher right now compared to where Bitcoin's been at since January 2018. As I've told you, this is now just coming back to the January 2018 pricing, but Bitcoin was trading at 19,000 here. And Bitcoin today is 114,000. Clearly a better buy on the Bitcoin side. Again, I'm not trying to trigger anyone. I'm not trying to aggravate anyone. I technically hold more XRP in dollars than Bitcoin right now, but facts are facts, and that's the chart. So what I mean is, although people might want a $1 XRP to accumulate something, I don't know why at this point you just want a low price for the sake of accumulation. You'd also want to be investing in a good looking, strong chart, which it's not really the case until quite recently. Literally until quite recently, it started to show some strength. So what I would want ultimately is a push up into something euphoric above $10. And then when we do inevitably come back down, we would be holding this $2 to $3 level as a new support instead of 30 cents. So let's move on now to reserve rights and get through the final altcoins of today's podcast. I'm sorry I missed out on this one last week. I obviously had a lot of projects to cover and it was easy to skip over 1 out of 30. So here we are. We're looking at reserve rights on the daily, and we have a couple of important levels to consider: this rising trend line, rising resistance, parallel channel. So that would be a parallel channel where we've been consistently getting rejected off of it. And if we look at where the next alignment is for RSR on this parallel channel that's been our resistance, it's somewhere around the 786 fib in the month of December or November. And that move up from here would be about 460%. Now, I do anticipate RSR has the opportunity to make it back up to like almost 6 cents. So that would be right these two rejections and where it was hovering over in the last alt season. 6 cents to me would be a move from current price 600%. And now that sounds like a little, but guys, you have to understand, like it's actually quite a bit, especially when you're looking at shit like Ethereum. Okay. So where we are right now, funny enough, this was the chart back in 2020 into 2021. There's your C19 crash. It had a straight line parabola into September and then a major correction into October. And look at the price that it's trading at as we speak. So we know it could go from this price all the way up to 12 cents in quite a short amount of time, you know? So this is something that I'm personally holding as a venture capital position in my current portfolio. I don't hold too much of it. It's probably not even 2% of my entire portfolio, but I am looking for the 6 cent level personally. It's an area where we've gotten rejected off at the past, and it's a good enough move for me, in my opinion, to consider it a solid investment. I mean, 600% in the stock market is insanely difficult to achieve. So to be able to do that on a random altcoin investment, I'm very happy with. And again, I will also stagger out my sell orders. So 6 cents to me is kind of like on the de-risking / initial take profit side of things, 5 to 6 cents. But I could keep some orders open to 8, 9 cents. It's just anything above 9. We don't have too much data to work with, and you don't want to risk it just for the sake of it, you know, because not every altcoin goes into price discovery. All right. So you can't just like assume when it comes to investing. You have to use the data that you have. And I'm not so optimistic that every alt season has to do the same thing the last alt season did. I think that's not the smartest way to navigate your investment thesis. So I'm just being real with you, but at the same time, I would not be upset with a 600 to potentially 1000% move, and neither should you. That's an amazing move. So not too much to share regarding structure. I think, again, I'm just looking at where these support retests have been, and it's been accumulating around the 382. I love to see that, and the next impulse up should be around the 702 to 786, and I'd be looking for between the golden pocket and the 888 to be an area of interest for taking profits. Now we're moving on to Telcoin. I actually don't remember the last time I touched on Telcoin. We have a lot of data here going back to, let me pull up 3-day, check my levels, we're good. All right, so we have a lot of data for Telcoin going back to 2018 pretty much. So we have over here is your C19 crash, and if you bought the bottom like around the C19 crash support to today, it's up 2,700%. Amazing investment if you bought it in the worst of times back in the last cycle and you didn't take profits, for example. So that's a good thing to see because we have projects that are still to this day around the C19 crash levels. That's not so great. So another thing is from the bear market lows. If you were accumulating around lows to today, it's up about 280%. So in that case, it was like better to go with XRP. But remember, my investment thesis for this cycle was heavy XRP for a reason. And this is why when it comes to venture capital, I would consider plays like this because it has made progress over time. And also to catch up to prior all-time highs would be I already knew it would be a pretty crazy move. So this is a similar conversation to the project that we just looked at, reserve rights. Let me pull a fib. Very similar. Trading around the 382, holding it as support, very similar. Next major impulse around the 702 into the 786, insanely similar. I mean, look, it's probably even getting this resistance channel. Same shit. December, right around the top of the golden pockets, the same. Yep. So yeah, everything that I just taught you with RSR is the same story here with Telcoin in regards to the TA. These are moving pretty much lockstep, so I think they will probably be sold off initially at similar times. They're going to move the same way and sell off in the same way. Got some wicks up to about 3 cents, so around 3 cents is an area to start considering the risk. And around the 888, you're looking at about 600% move. So again, very similar percentages with retesting all-time high being a 1000% move. So can this get up to prior all-time high? Sure. It has traded to these levels before, but it hasn't traded to them since. And it hasn't broken out into price discovery, whilst Bitcoin has, right? So again, you're very much speculating on how an alt season could go, and making assumptions is never safe. So that's why I like to play within the area of where we've traded in the past. And obviously, if you're trading all the way down here and you look at coming back up to the golden pocket, it's a 1,700% move. So I know some people might be upset to hear that like not every project you invest in is going to go into price discovery, but man, how can you get upset about a potential 1,500% move? This was just back in October of last year before the Trump inauguration. We've had years to accumulate this shit. Okay, so even late stage in the cycle, there's still crazy moves ahead. And these are opportunities, in my opinion, right? Because to get the 15 or 17 or $18 XRP, that's a much crazier move than for this thing to just get back up to this range of the 888, where it'd be giving you potentially more ROI. I'm not sure how those would all measure out, but you could do the quick maths. So I wouldn't personally invest in this Telcoin project right now, especially if I have like the reserve rights play. They're very similar in that way, and I think they're going to trade off in a similar way regarding the final stages of this cycle. Now we're looking at Bitcoin Cash. Mamma mia, it's been a long time since I've looked at this. Okay, God. This is really rough, because we always like to look back in the past as technical analysts to see what it's done before, and this is trading at the same price when it launched in July of 2017. Yeah. Yeah. I would say avoid this thing. What is this for? So Bitcoin was trading at 19,000 here, and then Bitcoin was trading at 69,000 here, and then Bitcoin's now trading at 115,000 here. And you're trying to invest in this for what? Just buy Bitcoin. Like, these are distractions. Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, Bitcoin Cash, all of that. I know the BSV people are like the current cult du jour, but yeah, man, go to sleep. If you're here to make money, this shit is just a really big distraction, in my opinion. I hate to be so tough sounding on this because it's not just for the sake of it, but like you're really just wasting energy on this. I'm not sure why this was even voted on, to be honest. I'm sure it sounds similar to the last time that I had to review this thing, but this thing is just making lower highs over time. There has been no price discovery breakout yet, barely any ROI for an altcoin. If you bought the C19 crash lows, you not only are only up 150%, but you went lower into the bear market than the C19 crash. I mean, it's performing technically as good as Ethereum, I guess, if you bought the lows. But Ethereum is obviously a much better looking chart overall. Yeah, okay, let's skip this one. I'm not skipping, I shared my thoughts. These are truths. This is a waste of energy and a distraction, in my opinion. Now let's look at RSC, Research Coin. I've never looked at this coin before. This is an exception because, as I told you in the intro of today's video, we do not like to look at projects that have less than a year of chart history here on TradingView, but here it is. This one's getting a lot of attention. A lot of people are interested, so we're just kind of making the exception here today. I was able to just quickly pull a fib on this when I first looked at the chart because we have some data, but this went from effectively having launch to dump, right? 1 second, guys. I need to take a sip of water. All right. So this thing has launched as of inauguration time frame. It's lost 88% of its value. So I'm immediately worried about something like this. It's now popped up 180%. Sure, that's fine, but a lot of other things have as well. I mean, obviously, if you lose 90% of your value, it's easy to recover and make 200%, but everyone has to pile in at the absolute lows, which most people don't do because markets are scary at lows and nobody wants to buy. So again, like your average likelihood of even getting in here is pretty low, and that's a 99% move. And then you're more likely to be smart enough to get in probably around here, which is a 60% move. So the general investor is not catching absolute lows, and they're more in the chop time frame after it's already recovered. And honestly, real retail bought this thing. They bought the pump. They probably panic sold, or they maybe accumulated some more over here if they're lucky. So somewhere in the middle of this, I would assume the average person who's in on this research coin is maybe up 38%, 40% max. And then most people probably bought in all of this. So that means you're at a loss. This is why it's very difficult for me as a technical analyst to review a chart that has under a year of chart history. So please, guys, like when it comes to researching these, when it comes to reviewing these projects, I need some data. And this is so limited in data. It's not the worst chart I've ever seen, but like it already has some red flags. Losing 87% of your value that rapidly is not a good look. And then all this chop over here, I don't like either. Like big liquidity wick, this pump and dump over here. Yesterday was a 14% correction. Today we're back up 14%. Like this is just retail playing hot potato. I don't love stuff like this. So yeah, if you buy in very, very low and you enjoy the ride of alt season, you'll do very well. But this is not one of those charts you want to actively keep an eye on. It's too much chaos and also not enough data. So just look for any expansion past this level right here. I'm going to show you. We could also make this a lot easier if we go to the line chart, and I'm going to put a horizontal ray right here and right here. And then I'm going to bring this back to candles and you'll see what I mean. So if you break effectively above the 888 fib, I think this thing will go into price discovery, but it's because it's already in price discovery. It's in price discovery to the downside. So this would be just the new stages of a project being traded. We don't use this term price discovery just for the sake of it. It's just in the process of discovering its price, right? So it launched, it went way lower than its launch price, and now here we are somewhere in the middle of the range, kind of catching up. And just because of where we're at in the cycle, it's not going to take too much for this thing to go up 200% from here. It's likely to be the case. So one thing we could do is we can turn this fib this way, and this will give us a couple levels to the upside to consider. for potential take profits for those that are interested. I don't know if it'll make it up that high. If you're like, that's a huge range, but that is an altcoin range. Yeah. That 1618 on the log pull is in alignment with the 4236, so that's not weird to me. This means from the current prices to the first initial like de-risking target would be about 300%, and then the entire move up to 6 maybe. So like I would put emphasis on 5 because even that's probably a big psychological level for such a project to get to. That's a big move, man. So this is very limited data for me to work with. Don't take any of this as some like finite call. It's not. None of this is. But those are my thoughts. I think once it gets surpast this 888 fib and push through this barrier of liquidity right there, it could sharply move above $1.60 and then press towards 2. And I do think 250 is gonna make it at least minimum. I see 250 for this cycle on Research Coin, and then the move into 5 on the more extreme side of things. And then we would be looking to like, how is the overall cycle looking? And we could adjust these targets later on. If we're seeing a move up to 250 and things are looking good, then we'll adjust. You know, remember, the blow off top moment on crypto could happen in a single week. So it could do something where it moves from 4 to 8 literally in 2 or 3 days, and then it's back down at 2 weeks later. Okay. So you have to be aware that that's the nature of cryptocurrency. It's very chaotic. It's wild. Okay, let's wrap it up with XYO. A lot of people wanted me to look at this project. I am also not sure why, but here we are. We have a lot of data to work with, so that's good. And clearly we've covered this project before. So I'm just going to extend out that fib a little bit to catch up. Trading around the 382, that's very similar to Reserve Rights and Telcoin, the projects that we looked at a little bit earlier. Also similar to what I think was going on with Telcoin is when you're measuring these bear market, or not bear market, but just like buying the last cycle, you know? You're up, oh my goodness, wow, XYO. Wow, so if you bought this pain down here, you're really in a good position with this project. 3,000% up. If you bought this bear market, which was probably a little tricky to navigate just because you see the way this chops, it's violent. It's up about 147%. So not as, I mean, overall, this looks like shit. This move looks like shit. And all of this looks like shit, you know, 97% losses. All of the big moves up are like very spiky and clearly just, yeah, unsophisticated traders moving this project around. So no offense here, but there's a lot of things that look not so great. You had a nice opportunity in the last cycle to accumulate super low, but as of today, it's been making some wild swings. Like this has been a 74% correction, and this has been a 80% correction in the midst of recovery. So yeah, craziness. Where are we at to retest all-time highs? So we got about a 680% move to the upside. That's fair. Because we've already pierced the 786, it's kind of done that crazy alt season move that I've told you guys about. And like if you look right here, this 1 3-day candle was 200% up in 3 days, and it swiped through the 786. So this is kind of what I was showing you as a possibility on how a lot of alt seasons could go. And if you were to buy the bottom up to that move, that's a 1,200% move. I'm not saying that's the end of the cycle for XYO, but like that's the kind of shit that you would feel good getting out of, right? Because if you made a 1,200% move before an 80% correction, you would feel like, damn, I did the right thing. And then on top of that, you're still out 260 days ago. You'd have been out on a play that you could have made a really nice move in. So in the next cycle, that's how you should be playing it, in my opinion. Like I'm definitely going to be looking at next cycle like that. Wherever I see Ethereum bottom out, get ready for more pain in these speculative altcoins, because remember, ETH bottomed out here June 2022, whilst all these other speculative altcoins kept going. lower and lower and lower in accordance with the lunar cycle. All right, the lunar and the solar cycles that I teach. Then you have here, we had an eclipse and then we had everything pivot. So getting in around that eclipse, that was a very strategic move. And I would suspect that's probably going to be in alignment with this eclipse in 2026. This one right here in August. It's an opinion for now, but I could see that being the case. Anyways, getting back to this, I would consider this venture capital. There's nothing really super trustworthy here for me to be banking on. It's actually not trading much higher from where it launched, if you consider that, back all the way in 2018. So this has been just chopping and chopping and chopping. And the way to take advantage of this was obviously like any other venture capital play, you have to be getting in at low oversold prices. This is not something where late stage cycle you want to be FOMOing in, which retail has a tendency to do. So around the 888 where we have this cluster over here is about a 400% move, and then up to the all-time high is about 600. So I would personally skip out on this one in my own investment thesis. I already got in reserve rights and Aerodrome as like my late cycle plays. I'm probably done investing for right now in this cycle unless something wild happens in eclipse season. I'm happy with where I'm at with all of my long-term plays, with my Bitcoin play, with my XRP play, and all the H-bar, Stellar Lumens, etc., Doge. I will now, again, hopefully we'll be shifting our what I'm investing in specials, which the last one was last week. We'll be shifting those to like the exit strategy specials, and we'll be dialing in a lot more regarding that part of the conversation. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. A lot covered in today's podcast. We could see a little bit more pain in the in the Bitcoin chart, but we are around that 48-hour window of the August new moon. And what I like about this is the fact that we're seeing positive price in ETH, Sol, and Bitcoin dominance is even dipping into the red, while we also know we will have an upside CME gap coming in and the traditional markets opening up tomorrow, the first day since that euphoric move on Friday. So we have a lot that'll go down tomorrow. For those of you that are watching this on Tuesday or Wednesday, how dare you? But anyways, jokes aside, I hope you guys appreciate all the detail and all the stream of consciousness I've poured into today's podcast. This one really meant a lot to me, and I wanted to give you as much value as possible in this follow-up to the What I'm Investing in special that I released last week. And I appreciate and I'm grateful for every single one of you, truly. Wishing you all a beautiful week ahead in the Matrix. Much love.